I want to head now to the Middle East. Hamas has released 3 more Israeli hostages today and 5 Thai nationals also abducted during the October 2023 terror attacks. This is how it looked in Jabalia, Gaza, as masked militants handed over Agam Berger, a 28-year-old female Israeli soldier. Later, in the midst of a chaotic crowd in Khan Yunis, militants released 2 Israeli civilians. This is video of 29-year-old Arbel Yehud being moved through the crowd. A delay in her release prompted Israel to extend its blockade of northern Gaza an extra 48 hours. The other civilian released, Gadi Moses, an 80-year-old male. The 5 Thai nationals were handed over in a separate agreement between Israel and Hamas. Now, Israel's government is condemning the chaotic scenes and huge crowds seen during the hostages' release in Khan Yunis. It announced a delay in the planned release of 110 Palestinian prisoners. That release now set to happen soon.
8 hostages, 3 Israelis and 5 Thai citizens have been released from captivity in Gaza and are now back on Israeli soil. The first to be freed was Agam Berger, a 20-year-old Israeli soldier. These were highly emotional moments when she was reunited with her family. CNN's Jeremy Diamond is joining me now from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Jeremy, tell us more about the release, the scene, and now the potential consequences.
Well, indeed, Frederica, 8 hostages released from the Gaza Strip today, but it didn't all go as smoothly as Israeli officials had hoped or expected. We first saw, of course, the release of that Israeli soldier, Agam Berger, from the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but it was the release of 7 others in Khan Yunis, in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, that was unwieldy and chaotic and prompted concerns from Israeli officials. We saw in particular as one hostage, 29-year-old Arbel Yehud, who was taken captive from kibbutz near Oz on October 7th. She was surrounded by these masked Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad militants and an enormous unruly crowd. You could see in the images as she was being taken to that Red Cross vehicle, the look on her face seeming absolutely terrified by the scene. It was very, very chaotic indeed until she was ultimately brought into one of those Red Cross vehicles. Gadi Moses, who was an 80-year-old hostage who was also taken captive from kibbutz near Oz, was also included in that transfer. And then we also had 5 Thai nationals who were taken hostage from Israeli communities around the Gaza Strip on October 7th, who were also released in that very same exchange. We understand that all of them are now on Israeli soil, have been reunited with their families after more than 15 months of captivity. Fred?
Okay, and then, Jeremy, now Israel is saying it's delaying the release of the Palestinian prisoners. What, there were more than 100 of them. I mean, what's the timetable that is being given now, if at all?
That's right. 110 Palestinian prisoners were scheduled to be released from Israeli prisons in exchange for those 3 Israeli hostages. The 5 Thai nationals who are being released outside of the framework of this agreement. The bus carrying those prisoners was actually just beginning to leave Ofer prison in the West Bank when suddenly it was turned around. And that came at the same time as Israeli officials put out a statement saying that because of the chaotic manner in which these hostages were released, which the Israeli Prime Minister referred to as being a cruel final moments of captivity for Arbel Yehud. Because of that, the Israeli government delayed the release of those Palestinian prisoners. We are now learning that they are set to be released at 5 p.m. local time. That's just over an hour from now. So we expect that release to move forward, but clearly only after Israeli officials raised severe concerns and objections to the mediators about the manner in which Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad conducted this release today, making very clear that that was unacceptable and that it cannot happen for the next release, which is scheduled for this coming Saturday. Fred?
All right. Jeremy Diamond, thank you so much.
I want to bring in Meirav Sunshine. She is a senior analyst on Israel at the International Crisis Group. Meirav, great to have you with us today, and I'm sure you've seen some of these images, absolutely chaotic. You see Hamas members as well as Islamic Jihad trying to get hostages to safety, hand them over to the ICRC. I'm just curious in terms of what your view is in terms of the fragility of this ceasefire, and importantly, what you think of Israel delaying the release of Palestinians, and whether we're sitting on very fragile territory right now.
Hi, thanks. Well, we are in fragile territory, but I think so far what we've seen is that both sides have an interest in continuing, and the mediators, Qatar and the US specifically, have been, I think, very on top of getting things to go as smoothly as they can. Every time you have a release, I think both sides try to show, their power, and Hamas is clearly still intact in Gaza, and that's very difficult for Israelis to see. But ultimately, the hostages have been returned. They are walking on their feet. An 80-year-old was released today, and he looks much better than I think any of us would have expected. So I think the end result is what is important. And Israel, of course, because of the scenes and because of the chaos, communicated to the mediators, and it's been reported that they decided to delay the release of prisoners. But ultimately, the deal so far is going, I think, more smoothly than many of us would have anticipated. So for now, I think that's just going to be part of the process. It's going to be harrowing at every moment, and ultimately, so far, it's been going.
In terms of Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, was in Gaza yesterday. What did you think of that? Does it hint at anything in terms of the future intentions for the enclave, keeping in mind that Donald Trump was very clear about wanting to see Palestinians move to Jordan and Egypt?
Yeah, well, I think it is significant that Trump's envoy was in Gaza. It's the first time in over 15 years that a U.S. official has been in Gaza. Now, he obviously doesn't engage with Hamas. He was a guest of Israel and the IDF. But it means that Trump is continuing to put his political weight behind this deal. He was also in Tel Aviv today, and he seemed to indicate to Netanyahu that he wants to see the phase 2 not only reached, but completed. So I think it's very clear that Trump is interested in seeing this deal go through. That means presumably an end to the war and an IDF full withdrawal from Gaza. But what that actually means, as you said, for the people of Gaza, for Palestinians more broadly, is unclear. And with Trump's rhetoric and the fact that we know Trump is not somebody who's a humanitarian or interested in Palestinian livelihood in general, or in Gaza specifically, it could mean a lot of things. Now, we all consider this issue of going to Jordan and Egypt dead on arrival, but he continues to talk about it. Israeli reports have said that this is a serious thing that's being considered. So I don't know how they think it's going to be helpful or constructive. And for Palestinians, being exiled out of their land is what they've been talking about since 1948, that they see as an injustice. So I don't see it as a stabilizing factor. But we'll have to wait and see. And so it's interesting that Trump is at once committed to the ceasefire, but the day after in Gaza, Israel has very specific demands about Hamas being exiled, disarming, things that I don't think Hamas is willing to do. So we're going to have to see where they come out on that.
What, in terms of the West Bank, which you and I have spoken about, in terms of it derailing potentially the ceasefire hostage agreement, what is your understanding of what the IDF's intention is in the West Bank, and they're thinking about having a permanent presence there? How does that change the calculus?
Well, first of all, the IDF has a permanent presence in the West Bank at all times because it's the occupier, it's an occupying power. It has been for over half a century. But since the ceasefire in Gaza went into effect, we've seen even more raids by the IDF, and a start of a military operation in Jenin. Israel ostensibly wants to eradicate and uproot terror in Jenin and other places in the West Bank, something that it's done to various degrees for many years. But it's important for the audience to understand that the minute that the ceasefire went into effect, Israel really set the West Bank on fire. Trump lifted sanctions from settlers. The defense minister in Israel released settlers that were in detention. And so it's been a lot more volatile than it already was. And that's not in the interest of Israeli security or Palestinians' security and livelihood. So I don't know if it's going to derail the ceasefire, but it's certainly a kind of quid pro quo within Israel where I think Netanyahu and the far right are basically saying we're going to have to stop for now in Gaza, but we're going to ramp things up in the West Bank and show Palestinians that we're still very much in charge. But unfortunately, Israel has so many times done these operations, and they only seem to recruit and raise the popularity of Hamas and of these types of operations, because ultimately these are people who are under occupation. So I don't think it's going to just go away.